Just think about that for a second. It's not about the wood and the stone. It's about cultivating a feeling. And this one idea, right here, it's at the very center of a massive debate in the world of architecture. So what we're really talking about today is a battle for the soul of architecture itself. We're diving into this deep conflict, a dialogue between two completely different ideas about what our buildings should actually be. Is a home just a piece of high-performance equipment, or is it something more? And this question from the architect Imad Darouich, it just cuts right through all the noise. I mean, think about it. In a world that is obsessed with data, with metrics, with efficiency, how do you possibly measure joy? How do you put a number on a feeling of peace or that gut feeling of being home? This question, this is the battle line. So let's lay out the two competing visions. On one side, we've got the mind. This is pure logic, and it's summed up perfectly by the famous modernist Le Corbusier, who said, "A house is a machine for living in." The primary goal, efficiency and performance. But on the other side, you have the soul. This is the voice of human experience, beautifully captured by Imad Darouich. A house is a prayer, a memory, a hug. The goal here isn't about performance, it's about serenity and meaning. All right, so first up, let's really dig into the case for pure function. It's an incredibly powerful and influential argument, one that champions an architecture built on pure and, yeah, some would say pretty cold, rational logic. But where did this even come from? What's so wild is how fast this idea spread. Mainly because it was way more than just a style. It was a full-on social revolution. It really kicks off in the late 19th century with Louis Sullivan's famous line, "Form follows function." Then, by the early 20th century, you have the Bauhaus school in Germany, and they take that phrase and turn it into this incredibly disciplined global movement. And it all reaches its peak in the mid-century with Le Corbusier, who gives us that unforgettable and kind of controversial idea of the house as a machine. And this whole philosophy had a really clear rule book, all aimed at radical efficiency. It meant you had to strip away anything unjustified, which they saw as, the fancy, expensive decorations of an old, unequal world. So say goodbye to any curves or arches that didn't have a structural point. Windows, they got standardized for order and easy mass production. And materials like concrete were the heroes because they were cheap and fast. The goal was speed, economy, logical performance, and in this new world, individual human emotion just wasn't part of the math. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. But for every argument, there's always a counter-argument, right? So let's turn away from the cold logic of the machine and listen to the answer of the soul. I mean, what a shift. Talk about a complete 180. We've gone from getting rid of unjustified curves to placing a hand on the shoulder of existence. This totally reframes what it means to build something. It's not just a technical problem to be solved anymore. It becomes this deeply personal, almost spiritual act. So then, what is the point of that beautiful arch or that window placed just so? Well, from this point of view, it's actually pretty simple. Function is what keeps us alive. It gives us shelter from the rain. It keeps us warm. But beauty is what gives us a reason to love that life. It's the thing that turns a shelter into a home. And this perspective goes even deeper. It often connects with spiritual traditions. This quote, which Darouich cites, suggests that an architect isn't just creating something out of thin air. Instead, they're kind of revealing a presence that's already there. So every shadow, every angle, every single beam of light, it becomes a little reminder of something much bigger than the building itself. So you might be thinking, all right, do we have to pick one? Is it mind or soul? Well, the good news is no, not at all. In fact, the absolute greatest architecture proves that function and beauty, the mind and the soul, they're not enemies, they're partners. Let's look at how. Okay, I've got a riddle for you. How could you possibly build a house where a river literally becomes one of the rooms and nature itself becomes a wall? It sounds like a line from a poem, right? But the answer was actually built with concrete and steel. How is that even possible? And the answer, of course, is one of the most famous houses in the entire world, Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. Here's how it perfectly unites mind and soul. The mind part, It's an absolute marvel of engineering, using these things called cantilevers to float the house directly over the waterfall. An incredible technical achievement. But the soul? The design makes the sound of the river a literal part of the living room, so the result isn't just a house, it's what Wright himself called an act of reverence for the earth. All right, let's try another one. How can a roof weighing thousands and thousands of tons, we're talking about a dome that weighs 7,500 tons, as much as the Eiffel Tower, create something as delicate and poetic as a rain of light? How can something so heavy feel so light? The answer is Jean Nouvel's incredible dome at the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. And here's how it works. Step 1 is all mind. Engineer this massive, mind-bogglingly complex steel dome. But then comes step 2, the soul. Punch nearly 8,000 unique star-like holes in it, inspired by traditional geometric patterns. And step 3 is the synthesis, the magic. As the sun moves, you get this breathtaking, moving, dappled rain of light that makes the entire space feel like it's breathing. So the big takeaway here is that the true masters, they don't choose, they unite. You see it with Lloyd Wright, who married that precise engineering with a deep harmony with nature. You see it with Hassan Fathy, who used functional, climate-smart clay to restore dignity and tradition for the poor. And with Jean Nouvel, using a massive dome to create a poetic rain of light. In every single case, the technical genius is there to serve a deeply human purpose, mind and soul, working together. And all of this brings us to a final and maybe the most profound point in this whole conversation. What if architecture isn't just about providing shelter or even about being beautiful? What if it's about something far more fundamental? What if building is actually an act of faith? And to really, truly get this, you have to understand the context. This way of thinking, it wasn't dreamed up in some peaceful, quiet studio. It was born from the heart of war. It comes from walking through streets where homes, places once filled with memories and life, have been just turned to rubble, to dust. When you see destruction on that scale, the simple act of building something new, anything new, takes on this incredible, powerful meaning. Because when you're faced with that kind of annihilation, all it takes is just one stone. One stone laid down with intention. That single act, it becomes an act of defiance against despair. It's an act of hope. It's a vote for the future. And that right there, that's the ultimate thesis. Architecture isn't just piling one stone on top of another. It is a promise. It's a promise that we will remain here, that we will endure, as long as the human heart is able to dream. So maybe the truest function of a building is to hold that promise for the future. So, after all the engineering and all the poetry, after the debates about mind and soul, what's the real test? How do we know if a building, any building, has truly, actually succeeded? Maybe it's not about the structural awards or the magazine covers. Maybe the ultimate test boils down to this one question. Does this wall welcome a lonely child? Does it offer comfort? Does it whisper, "You're safe here"? That is the question that gets to the very soul of architecture.